2 minutes left. Okay, it is 5 o'clock, the appointed hour on February the 7th, and I will welcome everyone to this planning meeting of council. We have all of our council in attendance with the exception of Steve Bartley, who may join us at a later time. And welcome to our staff. We have a number of staff with us today. Clerk Matt Smith is here, Margaret Potter, Denise McCarl, Grey County Planner Scott Taylor, and Rob Voigt. So welcome to all. This is a planning meeting of council, and we certainly do welcome visitors and participants in this. We ask only that those wishing to speak at these planning meetings contact the Clerk's Office of Development Services by noon on the day of the scheduled planning meeting. So with that, I will call this council meeting to order and begin with by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. We also recognize the Métis, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. We extend our gratitude to all Anishinaabe and Métis peoples and their descendants, past, present, and future, who continue to care for and inhabit these lands and tend these waters. With that, I will ask everyone to join me in a moment of reflection as we consider the business before us. Thank you. Is there any disclosure amongst the council members of any interest in the proceedings before us? Noting that you can so declare at any point if it should become advisable. So we will begin here today to discuss, learn about a proposal to amend land use planning permissions applying to certain lands in the municipality of Meaford. I must note that the Planning Act requires that a person who may later wish to file an appeal to council's decision on the zoning bylaw amendment application must either provide verbal comments today at this public meeting or provide written comments to council before the amendments are passed. The intention of this requirement is that only those people who have taken the time and the care to learn about the proposal and to engage in the planning process may have the opportunity to appeal a decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. While council is legally required to make decisions that conform to the county and local official plans, our guiding policies encourage us to reach out to members of this community to hear thoughts about the proposed changes. We have a variety of legal tools available to us that we can apply to development to help us ensure that new uses can coexist with existing uses, and with as minimal an impact as possible. So your constructive comments will help us to learn more about the neighborhood, in which will in turn help staff and council to select the right tools to manage change effectively and in a manner that honors our community values and priorities. Those who have pre-registered for today's meetings will have an opportunity to speak. And you don't have to be either in support or opposition. It is okay to share your thoughts about those elements that you do or that you don't like about the proposal, and to ask questions as well. And while the applicant will have an opportunity to respond to questions and comments at the end of the meeting, in some cases we may need to have staff carry out research on matters raised and to provide answers or additional information to you following the meeting. So with that, I will call this public meeting to order. It is a public meeting of the Council of the Municipality of Meaford to consider applications seeking to create a plan of condominium and to rezone the property known as Part Lot 23, Broken Front Concession in the Municipality of Meaford. This meeting is a mandatory part of the planning process, which has been set out by the Planning Act. Based on the rules in the Act, there must be at least 20 days notice given to residents within 120 meters of the property. And I note that notice was issued on January the 10th, giving more than the 20 days notice. So off we go. First, I'll ask Margaret Potter, our senior planner, to share a brief description of the application and to provide us with any public comment that has been received to date. Margaret, over to you.
Good evening, and thank you, Madam Mayor. The McCulloughs, through agent Miriam Vasney, have submitted applications which propose the creation of a private condominium road off of Side Road 23 to provide access to 5 single detached dwelling lots, with zoning bylaw amendment proposed to implement the development concept. The applications being considered at this public meeting include a plan of condominium for which the County of Grey is the approval authority, and the zoning bylaw amendment for which the Municipality of Meaford is the approval authority. Hence, as indicated by the Mayor, this public meeting will consider both applications. Although there are 2 decision makers on this development, staff from both municipalities are working collaboratively on these files, and no decisions will be made without input from both Meaford and Grey County, as well as input we hear from members of the public today and partner agencies. The necessary consent applications to create the new lots would be processed and circulated through the Committee of Adjustment following consideration of the zoning and condominium. These lands are in a designated settlement area in both Meaford and County official plans, which means they have been identified for growth, provided new development on the lots can be serviced and safely accommodated. I believe the applicant team will be presenting details on their application, the nature of the proposal, and supporting studies. I will provide a summary of the process to date and the next steps. The condominium and zoning amendment applications were originally received and deemed complete for the purposes of circulation in 2020. Notice of the applications went out at that time to the public and agencies. Determination of completeness is an indication that the supporting documentation requested has been provided by the applicant, but it is not an analysis of whether the documentation is satisfactory. In light of the technical nature of the submission documents, a public meeting was not scheduled right away. Technical comments were shared with the applicant team, who made a second submission with additional details in November of 2021 and requested that a public meeting be scheduled. This second submission is still under review by staff, agencies, and the peer review consultant, with no decisions having been made. The documents are available on the municipal website under current developments. Staff would like to note that the refinements proposed to the environmental protection zoning are being reviewed in detail by the Grey Sable Conservation Authority. The treed ridge along Bayshore Road is generally captured within the environmental protection area, and this constraint is the reason that individual access to the proposed lots from Bayshore Road is not part of the proposal. Demonstration that the proposed lots can be serviced by well and septic, and that stormwater management and drainage function properly with no negative impact to neighboring property owners is something that the peer review consultant will critically assess on behalf of the municipality. Today, we are here to hear from members of the public. Public comments will be considered with final review comments from agencies like the Grey Sable Conservation Authority and the peer review consultant as part of any future recommendation report to council. Agency comments received to date include, on the first submission, the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority provided feedback relating to the provincial policy statement, natural hazards such as watercourses and slopes, natural heritage, water including stormwater management and groundwater, as well as mitigation measures. In responding to the first submission, they recommended deferral until additional information is provided. And I would note that additional comments are anticipated from the Conservation Authority after they have had an opportunity to assess the second submission. The City of Owen Sound provided a report indicating concerns from a growth management and servicing perspective and requesting a copy of the county's evaluation. Enbridge Gas provided a standard comment requesting a condition that provides for easements and/or agreements necessary for gas service. Hydro One provided a standard comment recommending consultation with the local distributor. And comments with no objection or concern were received from the historic Saugeen Métis, Canada Post, and Bruce Telecom. After the second submission, the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation questioned whether an archaeological assessment had been done, which it has, and whether the site had been disturbed previously. With respect to public comments, they were received from Bill Black, the Fairmans, Doug McDougall, Rudy Meyer, Donna Mitchell, Kevin and Barbara Moffat, Mary Wallace Morris, Ed and Susan Stengel, John Tackaberry, Don Tackaberry, and Lorelei Spencer when the notice of the application went out. And since the notice of the public hearing, we've received additional comments from Mary Wallace Morris and Steve Morris, Glenn Harada, Pam Arulo, Jean Corraway, Paul and Lynn Trask, Lorelei Spencer, and Bill Black. In summary, these comments focus on drainage and stormwater management, access considerations, protection of trees along the ridge, the number of new homes and precedent for future requests, well water supply and quality, and privacy, noise, and light impact to abutting neighbors. Staff look forward to hearing additional comments from the public tonight and will consider both written and oral comments received together with departmental, agency, and peer review comments as part of any future report to council on these applications. Responses to the comments and questions received will be covered as part of any future staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. And now I'll give Scott Taylor a turn to tell us, explain the county's role in this planning process.
Yes, thank you very much.
Scott?
Thank you very much, Mayor Klumpus and members of Meaford Council and all those tuning into the meeting this evening. I think Margaret's summary has done an excellent job of setting forth some of the roles in terms of the county being the approval authority, county council being the approval authority on the plan of condominium, and Meaford Council being the approval authority on the zoning amendment. So more than anything else, I'm here to listen tonight, to take note of any comments or questions from members of the public and or council, and to assist Meaford staff in answering any questions that we can tonight, and or taking away those questions and comments and responding in terms of a future staff report. So with that, I will be quiet and listen and assist in any way I can.
Thank you, Scott. And now I'll call on Miriam Vasny as a planning consultant for the applicant to go over the proposal in more detail. There you are. Welcome.
Okay, good. I was looking for myself. Oh. Hi, my name is Miriam Vasny, and I'm a registered professional planner acting on behalf of McCulloughs on these two applications, one for a zoning bylaw amendment and the other for a plan of condominium. I will be presenting basically an overview of the property and planning policies affecting the property. And Crozier Engineering, we have their consultant team here tonight to discuss and present stormwater management, drainage, and the private servicing proposed for the lots. So next slide, please. So the subject lands, as noted, are part of lot 23, Broken Front Concession. And this property is approximately 4 kilometers north of Leith on the east side of Bayshore Drive. The site also is located approximately 400 meters east of Georgian Bay on the top of the Nipissing Ridge. The property is rectangular in shape, and a few years ago, McCullough's purchased an unopened road allowance from the municipality that leads down to side road 23, and this was purchased for access to the properties, as the steep slope and wooded area on from Bayshore Drive up to the property would be just insurmountable, and to establish individual driveways from that road. Next slide, please. So the proposal is to create 4 new lots and 1 retained lot for a total of 5 residential lots. These lots will be created on a private road, which will be a common element condominium road. And this road, as I said, connects to side road 23. And this private road, will be owned and maintained by the future 5 lot owners. The zoning bylaw amendment is required to redefine the environmental protection lands on the subject property and appropriately zone the private road, common element road. Plan of condominium is required to create that road. So that's why we have the 2 applications. All proposed lots are proposed to be serviced privately with a private well and septic system. And the applications for consent will be considered in the future by the Committee of Adjustment. So next slide, please. So this is the surrounding land uses. So the property is outlined in red. To the immediate east, there is a farm parcel with agricultural crops. And then surrounding the subject property are residential lots. The residential uses on the west side of Bayshore Road are generally at the shoreline, and the other residential lots are basically rural residential dwellings. Next slide, please. An environmental impact study was completed for the site, and the field surveys confirmed that there were 3 drainage features on the subject lands that convey water from the east, so basically the agricultural property to the east, across the property, down the Nipissing Ridge, and ultimately discharging into Georgian Bay. The EIS also concluded that based on the site conditions and the steep slope of the Nipissing Ridge, that fish passage into these drainage features is not possible. So, and no fish were observed during the field surveys, and all 3 drainage features are classified as seasonal indirect fish habitat. There were no significant valleylands, woodlands, or significant wetlands on the subject property. There is no finding of rare vegetation community, no specialized habitat, and no sightings of species at risk. The EIS concluded that the proposed development is feasible and will have no negative impact on the natural heritage features and their functions, provided that the recommendations and mitigative measures in the EIS are implemented. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed drainage features and the proposed lots. So the delineation of these lots were based on 3 criteria: that no lot line would bisect any of the drainage features, and where feasible, the drainage feature and buffer thereto would be contained on 1 lot, not split, and also provide equitable development areas for all the 5 lots. Next slide, please. Reviewing the Provincial Policy Statement 2020, the property is considered rural lands in a rural area. The PPS does permit development on rural lands, provided that natural features and areas are protected for the long term. And as I noted earlier, the EIS demonstrated that there will be no negative impacts on these natural features or the ecological functions. The proposed development is consistent with 2020 PPS. Next slide, please. The County of Grey official plan designates the lands inland lakes and shoreline and hazard lands. Low density residential dwellings are permitted within this designation, and the creation of 4 new lots and 1 retained lot is considered low density development. The hydrological assessment concluded that individual wells could be established for each lot that would be capable of providing suitable quantity and quality of potable water for normal domestic use without impacting existing wells in the area. The functional servicing report demonstrated that each proposed lot can accommodate an approved sanitary disposal system with an adequate area to accommodate 100% contingency envelope on the lot should an original septic facility fail. The proposed development does maintain the intent and direction of the Grey County official plan. Next slide, please. The Municipality of Meaford official plan designates the subject property shoreline and environmental protection. Permitted uses within this designation include single detached dwellings. The general objectives of the shoreline designation is to ensure that new development is consistent with the scale and character of the shoreline residential area and to ensure that impacts on natural heritage features and groundwater resources in the area are minimized. The proposed 4 new lots and retained lot are consistent with the scale and character of the area. The lots are quite large. The EIS concluded that there will be no impacts on the natural heritage features, and the hydrological assessment concluded that there will be no impact on groundwater resources in the area, and the proposed development does maintain the direction and intent of the Municipality of Meaford official plan. Next slide, please. So the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The slope of the Nipissing Ridge and the required 15-meter setback from the top of the ridge and the drainage features and their associated buffers will be zoned EP. That means no development is permitted in the areas zoned EP. The residential limited service, RLS zone, will be applied to the shoreline lots accessed by any road that is not a year-round maintained public road. As these lots are fronting onto a private road, the RLS zone is the applicable zone. And we are proposing a holding H symbol on that zone, and that will be lifted when the common element road is constructed and registered. The Municipality of Meaford bylaw has an exception number in their bylaw that is set aside for any lands that are to be maintained without any buildings or structures on them. So this particular zone is being applied to the common element road as no buildings or structures can be placed on this portion. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the proposed plan of condominium and zoning bylaw amendment applications are consistent with the provincial policy statement and the Grey County and Municipality of Meaford official plans. The proposed development has merit and does constitute good planning. And now, as I mentioned, Crozier Engineering has a presentation to present the engineering portion of the proposed development. So I'll turn it over to them.
I believe we have George Cooper and Chris Garretts as the applicant's engineering consultants. Welcome.
Evening, can everyone hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. My name is George Cooper. I am a project engineer at CF Crozier and Associates working on this project, and we'll be speaking today with my colleague Evan Finbow regarding some of the technical studies that have been completed to date. Next slide, please. So the supporting studies that have been completed include the functional servicing and stormwater management report, which I will be primarily speaking about tonight, the hydrogeological assessment, which my colleague Evan will speak about, the sightline analysis, and the environmental impact study, which Miriam has also touched on. Next slide, please. So we'll be speaking today about the major components to the design, which include obviously the creation of the 4 state residential lots, plus the one retained lot. The private services being well and septic. Access provided via private common element condominium road from side road 23. This road will also include culvert crossings to convey external runoff and maintain existing drainage patterns. Low impact designs to provide sufficient quality and quantity control for the drainage on site, as well as erosion and sediment controls during construction. Next slide, please. Previously stated, the proposed lots will be on private services, including on-site sewage treatment systems. Through our studies and our drawings, we have provided the preliminary sizing of a filter bed footprints. And these were determined assuming that there was only going to be the minimal amount of treatment, which would be a septic tank only, as well as poor infiltration within the soils. Now, these footprints can be reduced using tertiary treatments such as a water loop biofilter, but those will be determined at a later date once they go through detailed design for the individual lots. Let's say in the next point here, those individual septic designs will need to be approved by the municipality through a building permit application. And on-site sewage systems will need to meet all minimum setback requirements from existing proposed wells, buildings, property lines, and infiltration trenches. Due to the large size of each of these lots, we have demonstrated that there is going to be sufficient space to have a sewage system meeting all setbacks. Next slide, please. Similarly, the drilled wells will be proposed for each lot. Well locations will be confirmed at the building permit stage. And just like the septic systems, all wells will meet the minimum setback requirements. That'll be from the septics, from the infiltration trenches, etc. And my colleague Evan, who hopefully is able to speak here, will go into further detail about the hydrogeologic assessment completed.
I think next slide. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Evan Finbo, and I'm a geoscientist in training, specializing in groundwater resources. And on this project, I'm working with Chris Garretts, the senior hydrogeologist. Mr. Garretts is also in attendance tonight. I'm here to speak to you today on the hydrogeologic considerations made for this project. In July 2020, Crozier completed a hydrogeologic assessment for the site, and based on the hydrogeologic setting of the proposed lots to be serviced, it was found that groundwater resources existing in the area are sufficient in quantity and quality to support the 5 lots. Additionally, in October 2021, a survey letter was circulated to all residents in the area requesting identification of water supply resources. The findings of this door-to-door survey did not reveal any concerns with respect to the existing water supply sources in the area. The previously mentioned assessment was then updated with the new information, and this assessment was updated for November 2021. In consultation with the town's engineers and as a part of further due diligence, we've also reached out to various residents in the area to conduct well baseline testing consisting of both quality and quantity tests to ensure that future impacts to water supply resources do not occur. From a hydrogeologic standpoint, that is everything. So I'd like to thank you and now pass it back to George.
Thanks, Evan. Next slide, please. So as has been noted previously, there will be a private roadway accessing the 5 proposed lots. This private common element condominium road will be accessed from side road 23. The private road will be routed through a 10-meter corridor between side road 23 and the subject site, which then widens to a 20-meter corridor along the frontage of the proposed lots. This roadway will also contain drainage culverts, which you can see on some of the screenshots on this slide. These culverts have been sized to convey up to and including the 100-year storm event safely without any overtopping over the road. Runoff from the road will be directed to the ditches that have also been sized sufficiently to convey 100-year flows and will maintain existing drainage patterns. The roadway has been designed with a 6-meter wide platform, which will meet the requirements for EMS access to get to and from the lots. The road has also been aligned to maintain the existing tree line along the eastern property line and reduce or increase privacy as best as possible. Next slide, please. For stormwater management, infiltration trenches are proposed to provide quantity and quality control. These trenches have been sized to meet requirements for enhanced treatment for the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks guidelines. Storage volumes within the infiltration trenches are sufficient to provide quantity control, to control the post-development flows to pre-development levels, which means that post-development, once the road has been built, the drainage leaving the site will be no more than the existing drainage conditions. And again, these infiltration trenches will be located so that they meet all setback requirements from the wells and septic systems. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the proposed development can be adequately serviced with wells and on-site sewage systems. The proposed lots can be safely accessed via the proposed private common element condominium road. The stormwater management strategy will meet all requirements for quality and quantity control per the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and appropriate erosion and sediment controls have been specified and will be installed prior to any site activities. I'd like to thank everyone for their attention today during this presentation, and I'm open to any questions that may come up. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have 3 pre-registrations for this meeting by members of the public, and so I will call on first Lorelei Spencer. Are you with us? There you are.
Good morning, or sorry, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. I'm here just to speak on behalf of some individuals that are adjacent landowners. We did provide correspondence to that effect, and I expect that all of you have received a copy of that at this point. The Tackaberry family, the Vujic family, and the Hilt family are concerned. The Tackaberry family is immediately east of the proposed common element condominium roadway. The Vujic family is immediately west of that roadway proposed, and the Hilt family lives on the corner just to the south. The concerns that are weighing on them, we know that the creation of the Tackaberry lot in particular was required to go through a species at risk assessment, and it seems a little bit premature that that risk assessment doesn't seem to be carried over to the applications at hand. In addition to that, there is concern with respect to the safety measures that will be required from that 10-meter road right of way to enter into that 20-meter width, and what that will look like, and whether stoplights are required when it gets to the final engineering stage. I will note that there's no mention of site plan control being applied to this site, so that's another question that we would like to see addressed at some point in time in future from a staff perspective. In addition, there's concern about the loss of privacy for those parties and the ingress and egress of those properties once it is developed. There's question about whether or not there would be some way of having the common element condominium road entered through a different way off the Bayshore Road, and that's a question that we'd also like staff to consider as well. That's the majority of my comments at this point in time, but they also stem to well water, which I think has already been discussed, and the surface water and pond water sources that these individuals use for their homes. So I'm happy to provide clarity and follow up with further correspondence, but I believe staff can address those comments back to us at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Bill Black.
Yeah, that's better.
There you are.
I'm a resident. Our lot would be, if you were to drive down County Road 23 towards the water, just to give reference, our lot would be the first lot north of that unopened road allowance. So we are directly affected by any of the changes. Our concern is it doesn't appear that there has been any concern given to where the water goes, and there's an increase in water flow because of the work that's going to be done. So in a nutshell, the unopened road allowance that would be 23 side road if it continued onto the water has a waterway along it, or a drainage ditch that gathers quite a bit of the water that goes underneath the road. There are 6 culverts that go underneath the road in the area, and those culverts carry a considerable amount of storm water in the spring, and of course if we have a storm. The capacity of that ditch to continue to carry the water is being stretched now, and so any additional element to it is a concern of ours. The existing ditch that's maintained by the town of Meaford on the town of Meaford's property is eroding our property now and is about to damage one of our buildings on our property. So you're going to be sending more water down the ditch, and we are very concerned about that. So that I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. All of the elements of the report that I have read have spoken to the drainage of the property, the drainage that circumvents the road. But I haven't seen anyone talk about the people that have to accept that water on their property. So it's really great that there's been a lot of drainage and it's all conforming to the Planning Act and all of those good things, but it's going to shove more water down our way. So that's our concern. Secondary concern, the integrity of the slope. If people are going to buy those lots, they're going to tear down trees because they're going to want to have a nice view of the water. And that's going to affect the integrity of the slope, I would imagine, over time. So that's another concern that we have. Should also mention that one of the natural water courses is directly east of the entranceway to Buckingham Lane. And in other words, the road that goes to Buckingham Lane to service the lots. During a storm in 2020, there was so much water coming down, it covered the road, eroded the road, and there's going to be more water coming down. So I don't think there's adequate provisions for the waterway for the storm runoff that we have to put up with when there's additional water coming from anywhere up the hill or west of us. So that's our concern. And I would hope that the council and the planning department would see fit to have a look at what's happening on the unopened road allowance. And I have got all kinds of pictures if you want them. I did send one quick video that we had. I sent it for your perusal. And we have more for you to look at if you want, but it's a big concern. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Black. And our third speaker is Mary Wallace Morris. There you are. Welcome.
Am I on there?
Yes, you are. We can hear you, but I can't see you.
Okay. I think that Bill Black actually outlined most of our concerns. Certainly with the water flow coming across the road, our property was flooded last year, and that's without any extra water coming from above us. So I think he's covered most of our concerns, and I look forward to listening to what the solutions will be.
All right. Well, thank you all for your comments. And I will ask Council if you have a question or needing clarification on any of these points at this stage. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I am a councillor. I'm not an engineer. And there's engineers on here. Bill Black mentioned all the extra water. Where's all this extra water coming from? Why would there be extra water? Can anybody explain that?
Who would like to? We'll just leave park that question for now, Councillor Bartley, and we don't have an answer right now. This will be one, obviously, that will need some more explanation. Is there anything else from Council? Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question, I guess, goes to maybe Scott and Rob. So we're taking, I'm assuming the picture at the very start of the presentation is the picture of the property. So I would say it's agriculture land here right now that's being farmed somewhat by somebody, I'm assuming. We're now, proposing to put it into a low density 5-lot condominium, I guess is maybe what it's called. And I guess I'm questioning why we allow such low density levels on agriculture lands when we have property inside the city limits or the town limits. We look for a density, I can't remember exactly all the numbers, but so many units per hectare. And we're taking basically a 6-hectare piece of property and making just 5 dwellings out of it. If I'm right or wrong on any of my comments, I would like to be corrected. And I would just like to know where Scott or Rob, how this fits into the official plan.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Vickers. And Scott, did you want to comment on that now?
Sure, through you, Mayor Klumpus, and thank you for your question, Councillor Vickers. So in this case, the lands in both the county official plan and the Mayford official plan are designated in a settlement area. And to your point, both the county plan and the Mayford plan have different designations of settlement area across the boundaries. So the former town of Mayford is what we call a primary settlement area, and those are those settlement areas where we have full municipal water and sewer services. And you're right, we do have minimum densities we ask for in those areas. And so that's 20 units per net hectare for new residential developments. But other settlement areas across the municipality, in this case, this one is in inland lakes and shoreline, or you have settlements such as Leith or Annan, that would both be secondary settlement areas, give consideration to limited new residential or commercial growth on private or partial services. And the county plan doesn't prescribe a set density in those privately serviced communities because in many cases that is determined by the technical specifications of the land that are assessed by the engineers and hydrogeologists as part of their assessment. So in this case, the county plan, although the lands further to the east are rural and are farmed, the county plan does designate these as a settlement area and therefore does contemplate the type of development that they're proposing, provided they can adequately demonstrate that you can get a well and a septic there and that the stormwater isn't going to have any effects on the surrounding areas. So I don't know if that answers your question, but certainly happy to follow up if there's anything further.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yep, if I could. So is there any consideration to, instead of making it separate wells, because, is it better to have one well servicing all 5 of the plots or to have 5 individual wells? And same thing with the septic, if we're kind of calling it a condominium, should we be looking at asking them to make it more like a condominium where all the lots kind of work together and have joint services? Is that a more acceptable way of looking after the water and sewer?
Over to you, Scott.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah. Thank you for that question. With respect to the benefits of sort of joint services versus individual, I'll start by saying I'm neither an engineer nor a hydrogeologist, so I'm probably not overly qualified to be answering this. But the provincial policy statement sets out what they call a servicing hierarchy, whereby when you're looking at any new development in your community, you start with, well, can it be serviced by municipal services? And in this case, that was easy to say, well, no, it can't because there's no water or sewer pipes in the area. And then you move down into what's called, can it be serviced by communal services? And so there are definitions in the provincial policy statement and in the provincial legislation and regulations, which speak to what constitutes a communal system. And I don't have that in front of me, but I believe it's either 6 or more units or 5 or more units constitutes a communal system. And there are other requirements that come with those communal systems. And so then you get into, well, if you can't do the communal and if you can't do the full municipal services, you can look at private individual services. And we have found over the years that sometimes when you have those relationships where, two or more lots are being serviced by a single well or a single septic system, it can lead to issues in the future between landowners. So if there's ever an issue with that well or that septic system, unless they have that formalized structure on, who pays for the repairs or who pays for the maintenance, that can create issues. So I will say it's not completely uncommon to see, when we're looking at small numbers of new lots being created like this, even in a condominium structure, that they would still be using individual wells and individual septic systems if the lands were demonstrated to be able to cover that. Sorry, that it is common to see, but I'm not necessarily qualified to speak to the technical specifications as to whether or not there's any merit to trying to group some of those systems together into a common system.
And if I may, so I guess my point is it better to have 5 different holes going into the ground for well water, or is it better off to have one well into the ground? It all comes down to contamination possibilities. Like, to me, it seems like you're increasing the risks of contamination into the water.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I wonder if council would consider deferring to Mr. Garrett, who's more qualified to speak to this one than I am, with a hydrogeology background.
And Mr. Garrett has indicated he would like to speak, so we'll turn it over to him for an answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just thought I could try and help Scott out a little bit. Councillor Vickers' question is great. In this situation, based on the geology of the area, first of all, I don't know that you would find one single well that would provide peak daily rates for 5 units. The aquifer here is a shale aquifer. It's not what you call efficient. So for normal domestic supply, it's fine because it draws down quickly and recharges quickly. But if you get into the higher rates, it might have some troubles keeping up. With an inefficient well system, the other thing is that the cone of influence does not extend very far. So having 5 on 5 adjacent lots, you would not typically see them interfering with each other. So it's actually more efficient that way. The net usage from the aquifer would be the same, obviously, 5 from 5 individual wells or 5 from 1. And I think Scott nailed the point about the communal systems. Like, you could service 5 from a single well without being considered a small water system, but you do have the issues with I'll give you an example that I encountered a week or so ago. 2 people sharing a well, and the person whose property the well is on, the house is vacant. So the neighbor keeps having issues because a heat lamp will break and the pump controls in the vacant house keep freezing up, and she has to get access to thaw the lines. So it's not ideal. So Councillor Vickers, does that help?
Yes, it does. I guess it doesn't go back to, and maybe it does. My concern is still having 5 holes in the ground going down to the aquifer, as only having 1. So what is the environmental risk of contamination of the aquifer?
Again, it's another great question. If I can just go on, and in the geological setting here, you've got fine-grained clays and silts for the most part down to the shale bedrock. And when a well is constructed, for a typical 6-inch diameter drilled well, it's a 10-inch diameter hole to a minimum of 6 meters. Well casing is installed inside of that. And then there is an annular seal, it's called, which is basically a clay grout that goes around that to provide a seal for the first 20 feet or 6 meters. So conceptually here, you're putting a clay plug in clay and silty materials. So you, for all intents and purposes, you've got that sealed in and there should be no contamination going down. If we were in the middle of like, a gravel plain or something, then that would be a more valid concern. But here with the natural protection from that fine-grained layer, there's a good level of protection there from contamination. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Garretts. And I think, Mr. Black, did you want to answer one of these questions? And I'll get to you in a moment, Councillor Greenfield. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Here, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Perfect. Steve, when I alluded to the water being increased the flow, it's quite simply, we're not creating any more water, we're just redirecting the water. And the water flows down the north side of Side Road 23. The town of Meaford has continually kept that ditch dug out so that it can facilitate the flow of water. And then that water is taken underneath the 4 or 5, actually 6 culverts in that general area, going underneath Bayshore Road, and then continuing on towards the lake. So there's quite a bit of fall. So those water courses develop quite a bit of speed. I will actually send all councillors a video that they can see what part of my concern would be. So I don't think there's any more water. I think it's just directed to a flow that is quite quick and causes erosion and damage as it's heading its way, and flooding as it's heading its way down towards the lake.
Thank you for that, Mr. Black. And Councillor Greenfield, you were next.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks to everyone who has joined us tonight and spoken. There's no doubt about it. I have seen the water problems down on Bayshore, down below this property. I think on any given year, there is potential for serious flooding and serious damage to the lower lying properties. I've heard a couple of times mentioned that there would be no additional water flow. I don't think we should be satisfied with that. I think between the developer and the municipality, we should be aiming at decreasing the runoff, safeguarding the runoff. We have a chance here with this development, and to me, that's the direction we should be going in. There's one other topic that I'm still puzzled, and I was talking to Mr. Armstrong earlier today, and he didn't think it was going to be a problem, but there recently has been a lot of the land east of the McCulloch property has been tile drained, and there's a major outlet of that tile draining that empties just immediately to the east of this road allowance. And I'm wondering, is that property always drained towards the McCulloch property? Is this something new? And if it is something new, that means more water to deal with. So I'm trying to get satisfied that problem is not going to make things actually worse on this. I've got some hesitations about going any further until we do have some answers. Runoff is a problem here, and we've got an opportunity to maybe not solve it, but at least alleviate it. And that's what we should be doing. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Greenfield. And Councillor Kentner, next.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I'm quite concerned about the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority's analysis of this proposal, and I was hoping that Mr. Greenfield and Mr. Vickers might help us tonight. The authority has recommended deferring a decision on this at this point, and I think there's a lot to be considered. As a matter, I've been there and seen, the flooding, whole roads underwater, like a river running down the road in some of these localities along the shoreline there. And I think that it reminds me that one engineer told me that we need a master stormwater and drainage plan as part of our official plan review. And I hope that, the concerns being raised here will prompt that as well. But I'm wondering if our representatives on the Conservation Authority are supporting the viewpoint of the authority, or are they going to approve, these amendments? Thank you.
Councillor Greenfield, are you willing to answer that, or do you want to wait for staff report?
Could I respond to Councillor Kentner, Your Worship?
Yes, of course.
Just one point. The report from Grey Sauble was written, I believe, last January of 2021. So that's over a year ago, and I believe that there have been further studies as far as the environmental impact study and stormwater management. I believe Croziers have worked on them since. So that may be a factor, Councillor Kentner, that it maybe makes it not quite as acute for myself representing Grey Sauble. I certainly hear what you're saying, and as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I've got problems with the runoff. But as I say, that Grey Sauble report is 13 months old, so that things may have softened somewhat since that was written.
Okay. Thank you.
Would you like me to respond, Your Worship?
I'm just going to remind Council that this is not an opportunity for debate on this issue. We will be receiving a staff report and a follow-up to all of the questions that we've heard today. So this is not an opportunity for debate, but it is an opportunity for clarification. So with that, proviso, and Councillor Vickers, you've had a chance, so there are others who wish to speak. So I think George Cooper wanted to have a response here. I got that
Yes.
right?
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to provide a little bit of clarification on a few of the things that have been brought up. So the first item, just regarding the tile draining of the neighbor property to the east. So our original studies were actually completed prior to the tile draining of the adjacent fields. We did account for runoff coming from that neighbor's property going through our site. It has always been assumed that we would convey that stormwater and maintain existing drainage patterns through the cross culverts and within our road. So that has been accounted for when the tile drains went in. We had multiple meetings with the Conservation Authority, both on sites and away from sites, to discuss how to best account for those tile drains coming into the property. It was determined at the end of those meetings that those tile drains would have to be connected into our ditch system. And again, we are proposing very large ditches. We're taking up a 20-meter right-of-way with a 6-meter road, and then with large 7-meter wide ditches on either side. So that will be large enough to pick up the drainage coming from the neighborhood property, maintaining existing drainage patterns and conveying it safely to the existing drainage features. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear, that it had been accounted for and already discussed with the Conservation Authority. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. That's great. And was there anyone else? I saw another hand. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and everyone. Thank you for your presentation and the time and your thoughts. I have a question on one of the slides that was presented to us, and it showed all of the proposed lots. And on the westerly side, it was shown that there is designated an environmentally protected zone. Questions were, comments tonight were about tree removal. And my question is, when areas like that on the westerly side to the upper portion of the slope has an environmentally protected zone on it, would the lot owners be at will to cut down the trees inside an environmentally protected zone, or does that designation by itself prohibit such activities? Thank you.
Okay. Know if anyone wants to take a crack at that, or that will be one that will be responded to by staff in due time. Okay. And I did see Miriam. Did you want to comment now, or we'll move on? Your hand is gone. All right, then I'll ask if there are any points raised that our planning service would like to comment on. Margaret Potter or Denise? Margaret first. Okay. Floor is yours.
And thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to respond to a couple of the points made, to clarify, staff are not making any recommendations this evening. We're here to hear the concerns that were raised. And in terms of timing, it is correct that the Conservation Authority's written comments to date predate the latest submission from the applicant. So the latest submission has been shared with the Conservation Authority, and we do not have their up-to-date comments yet. That is something we will look forward to before completing a recommendation report. And also in that regard as well, from a technical review perspective, the municipality has a peer review consultant that is also looking this information over. They have requested some more information and met with the applicant to clarify some of their expectations, and we do anticipate detailed peer review comments, again, also prior to making any recommendation.
Great, thank you, Margaret. That's very clear. And I think that's, I did see Denise. Did you have a comment, Denise? Or are you happy with it? As we move on.
Thanks, Mayor Columbus. I just wanted to just remind everyone that I've been taking notes, and I'm sure the other planners on the call, like Scott Taylor and Margaret Potter, have been taking notes as well. So we're not always prepared to answer all the questions because we don't have all the answers at the meeting, right, but we want to make sure that the questions, the very specific questions people ask, like the ones that some of the councillors have raised, are included in our follow-up staff report. So we'll make sure that those are included, and just some of those things are already things we're looking at. So just that little reminder. Thanks very much.
And thank you for that. Duly noted. All right, so Councillor Vickers, question? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I guess I have another question, is that as these lots are developed in the country on roads that probably aren't in real good shape, is there any ability for the municipality to ask for an upgrade by the people proposing the condominium to upgrade the road before the condominium or the severances are issued? Because it's one thing to have one or two people going down a road that's poorly maintained, but to have another 5 lots created, you know, could they have the responsibility to upgrade the road before it becomes an issue? I kind of compare it to when you have a subdivision being created inside the town limits. Again, sidewalks are required, and they quite often have to put money forward to those kind of projects. So when you get into these creations of lots, do we have the ability to ask the developer to upgrade the facilities, and the infrastructure that they will be using?
Thank you for that. Very good question. And I'm seeing no further hands from council, so I will ask the applicant to share your closing remarks. Miriam, you had your hand up at one point. Do you have anything to add at this point?
No, I had my hand up. Then George dove in, and he pretty much covered what I was.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you.
All right. Then I will thank you all for attending this meeting and for sharing your thoughts and great questions that on this application. As noted, this matter will now be turned back to the planning services staff, and then they will assemble some further information for us to consider. Once they have are satisfied that they have all of the information needed to provide a recommendation to council on the applications. So this report will evaluate how the proposal does or does not satisfy the provincial, the county, or the municipal policies that must be considered as part of council's decision. And it will also explore the various public and agency comments received regarding the application, some forthcoming now, noting these tools which may be applied in order to address concerns raised and to mitigate potential impacts on nearby properties. Again, I would ask if anyone wishes to to receive mailed notice of future decision on this file, please provide your contact information to the Planning Services Division by email at planning@meaford.ca. And with that, we have completed the agenda as before us tonight. And I think I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all for attending. Oh, sorry, I see a hand.
Yes, yes, that
Mr.
is.
Clerk, I'm
sorry.
I just caught that as I declared it with your permission and with your agreement, Council. Will we allow Don McCullough to speak? Go ahead, please.
Okay, my wife and I, Daphne, are the owners. We purchased that property 25 years ago, and we're asking for the 4 lots. We did not rezone the property. As Councillor Bickers has said, it's agriculture. No, it was not agriculture. It was rezoned by the township to the shoreline development. When we met with the former staff of the township, we inquired about the driveways up the ridge, and they said just to rather ask council permission to use the road allowance. At that time, council replied to us saying, you have to purchase the road allowance for the development. We went through a public meeting, and this was in 2015, and purchased the road allowance. Also at that time, they said that I would have to retain an engineer and a planner to go forward. The township, the neighbors on either side who have made concerns, they purchased their properties after 2015, so they were quite aware that development was going to be requested and proceeded with. And the one gentleman off Bayshore, he would like to join the condominium road for safety reasons, because he believes a fire truck or an ambulance will have difficulty coming up his roadway. Also, the one neighbor who owns a portion of the road allowance had indicated to me that he would like to possibly build a home at the back. So he's interested at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. McCullough, and thank you all for your comments and for participating in these public meeting this evening. And I again will declare the meeting adjourned. Good night, everyone.